Okay, here's a thought to start us off. What if everything we thought we knew about data in education, the scores, the metrics, what if it was actually getting in the way of real learning, of equity?
Yeah. And what if there was a completely different way? A way to understand what's really important in our schools and our communities. A way that sees the whole person.
It's a pretty provocative idea, isn't it? Almost radical when you think about how much we rely on those numbers.
It really is. We've been sort of conditioned, haven't we, to quantify success in these very narrow ways. But what if those tools, maybe designed with good intentions, were actually, well, limiting us, blinding us to the full picture?
What if they were even like perpetuating the problems we're trying to fix?
Exactly. That's the big question.
And that's precisely the aha moment we're diving into today. Welcome everyone to the deep dive.
Our mission today is to unpack some really revolutionary ideas about how we gather information, how we understand it, and how we use it to maybe foster genuine equity, real transformation in schools.
We're going to explore this compelling argument for shifting away from those conventional top-down data approaches towards something much more human-centered, more holistic. It's called street data.
And our guide for this is chapter1.pdf. It doesn't just lay out a new framework. It fundamentally challenges our assumptions about what knowledge even is in schools, what progress looks like.
Right. It digs into why street data is so crucial right now, maybe more than ever. And it introduces this really powerful, all-encompassing idea, holism. That's its core stance.
It really is the foundation.
And we kick things off with this incredibly inspiring, almost haunting quote from Arundhati Roy. The source uses it right at the beginning. Another world is not only possible, she is on her way. On a quiet day, I can hear her breathing.
Wow. It sets such a powerful tone, doesn't it? Hopeful, but also resonant.
It suggests transformation isn't just some far-off dream we're working towards.
No, it's like it's already emerging, already breathing life into the present.
Yeah.
Like a quiet revolution happening right now if we just tune in.
Yeah, if we can just hear it.
And the source uses that quote as an immediate invitation, really. An invitation to fundamentally reimagine how we know things, how we learn.
It's a call to see change, not just as something we have to create from nothing.
Right, but as something that's already unfolding, something we need to notice and nurture and, well, participate in.
Looking for those subtle signs in classrooms, in communities, hearing that breathing.
Exactly.
So if another world is possible and it's already on its way, what does that look like in education specifically? The source doesn't pull any punches. It throws this existential question right at us.
What is it?
Why do we rely on current forms of data? And what would happen if we simply stopped and embraced a new model? It's not suggesting a tweak, is it?
No, it's proposing a complete paradigm shift, questioning the very foundation of how we judge success and failure in schools.
And that's where the critique of our usual data approaches really comes in strong.
Yeah, the source brings in Audre Lorde's famous statement, "The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house."
Such a powerful metaphor.
It really is. It gets to the heart of why these traditional systems, which are often, let's face it, oppressive in certain ways, can't be truly fixed using the same metrics, the same mindsets, the same data tools that helped create the problems.
Right, like trying to fix a shaky foundation by just painting the walls with the original builder's tools. It might look better.
Superficially, yeah. But it doesn't change the underlying structural flaws. You're just reinforcing the existing structure, often.
And one of the biggest targets for this critique, according to the source, is what it calls the achievement gap mythology. It's not presented as just some neutral, objective way to measure performance differences.
No, not at all. It's framed as something that actually reflects and even perpetuates racialized hierarchy and white supremacy. That's a really strong claim.
It is, and it's a critical distinction the source wants us to grasp. The argument is that this whole achievement gap way of thinking, well, it perpetuates a deficit story about students of color.
Exactly. It constantly frames things in terms of what these students supposedly lack, what they don't know, what scores they don't hit, how they don't measure up to some standard.
Instead of acknowledging their strengths.
Precisely. Instead of valuing and building on their inherent strengths, their cultural wealth, their diverse ways of knowing, when you only look for deficits, you completely miss the assets.
Like, imagine a student who's brilliant at navigating complex social stuff, or maybe translates for their family, or understands community dynamics deeply.
Incredible skills.
But they struggle with a standardized test. The achievement gap framework just sees the low test score.
and completely misses those rich, valuable skills. It sends a message, doesn't it? That those gifts don't matter in school.
It's a fundamental reframing of how we see students. And it's not just the achievement gap concept. The source is also critical of some major U.S. education policies.
Oh yeah, names. No Child Left Behind back in 2001.
Race to the Top in 2009, Common Core in 2010.
Even the Every Child Can Succeed Act from 2015. We know
Yeah.
these names.
But the source asks us to look at them differently.
Through the lens of their intense focus on standards, percentages, metrics, the critique isn't necessarily that standards are inherently bad.
No, it's more subtle.
It's that these policies prioritize what's measurable over what's truly valuable. They push this narrow, quantifiable view of success.
And that can tragically overlook the really rich, complex stuff. Genuine learning, human development, the unique contexts of students and communities.
Totally. How do you measure empathy?
Mm.
Or leadership skills emerging in a group project?
Right.
Or connecting classroom learning to the real world?
You can't easily put a number on it.
But it's incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
Yet it often gets lost in the metrics pushed by these policies.
And this isn't just a U.S. thing, right? The source also questions global assessments like PISA, the Program for International Student Assessment.
Right, the international rankings came. PISA assesses 15-year-olds in reading, math, science. Countries use it to compare themselves.
But the source asks, what does PISA miss? Things like student well-being, belonging, cultural relevance.
Exactly. If you only optimize for PISA scores, are you accidentally neglecting crucial parts of what it means to educate a whole human being?
It's like polishing the leaves but ignoring the roots of the tree.
That's a great analogy. And speaking of roots, the source directly tackles systemic racism in education. It gives a very clear definition.
Yeah, it defines systemic racism as, let me see, the complex array of anti-Black practices, the unjustly gained political economic power of whites, the continuing economic and other resource inequalities along racial lines, and the white racist ideologies and attitudes created to maintain and rationalize white privilege and power.
It's direct.
Very direct. And it forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths.
And the key point is that this isn't just about individual prejudice, though that exists too.
Great. It's about how these practices, power dynamics, resource gaps, these ideologies, they're baked into the structure, into the policies, the everyday workings of schools.
Like maybe biased funding formulas, or disciplinary policies applied unevenly, or a curriculum that just leaves out whole histories and perspectives. These structural things, often hidden, create a system where some groups are constantly disadvantaged, even without obvious individual malice.
And traditional data models, by focusing on scores or attendance, often miss this completely.
Or worse, they inadvertently reinforce it by measuring outcomes without digging into those systemic causes.
So, if the traditional data is part of the problem, what's the alternative?
This brings us to holism. The source presents it as the foundation for street data. It starts by contrasting two big worldviews relevant to education.
Okay, what are they?
The linear worldview and the relational worldview.
Linear. That sounds like cause and effect.
Exactly. The source, referencing the National Indian Child Welfare Association, describes the linear view as rooted in European and mainstream American thought. It's very time-bound, logical cause has to come before effect. Think of a strict timeline, an assembly line. Step A leads to step B. Success is measured by moving along that line efficiently.
Okay, so what's the relational worldview?
This is where holism really comes in. It's a stark contrast. It sees life as harmonious relationships, where health is achieved by maintaining balance between the many interrelating factors in one circle of life.
So less like a line, more like a web.
Precisely. An intricate, dynamic web where everything affects everything else. Health, well-being, learning, they aren't destinations you reach by checking boxes.
Right.
They're a continuous state of balance you maintain by nurturing relationships and interconnectedness.
Like a vibrant ecosystem, the health of one part depends on all the others.
You got it. And that leads straight into holism itself. It's a core stance for street data. It pushes for a much broader view of well-being, way beyond just metrics. It recognizes that real learning, real flourishing, isn't just about test scores. It's about the whole person.
And the revolutionary part isn't just naming these different aspects of a person.
No, it's the idea that they're interconnected. You can't meaningfully improve one without considering and actively addressing the others.
The source illustrates this with 4 components, right? Often shown in a circle.
Yes, 4 interconnected components. First, the cognitive. Visualize sometimes as a head with gears turning.
Okay, what does that cover?
Things like self and community actualization,
Right.
role, identity, service, esteem. How do students see themselves as learners? What's their purpose, their sense of identity, their self-worth? Without this cognitive piece, learning stays superficial.
Makes sense. What's next?
The emotional component,
Mm.
represented by a heart. This is all about belonging and relationship, that fundamental human need for connection, feeling seen, valued, part of something.
So if a student doesn't feel safe or connected,
Their ability to learn, to take risks, it's severely hampered, no matter how smart they might be cognitively.
then the physical. The source shows a person exercising, representing basic needs.
Right. Food, water, housing, safety, and security. It highlights the undeniable truth that you can't learn effectively if your basic needs aren't met. If you're hungry or worried about where you'll sleep or don't feel safe, these aren't soft issues, they're prerequisites.
Absolutely crucial. And the last one.
The spiritual component, sometimes shown as arms reaching toward flames like inner light. This covers spirituality and life purpose, that deeper sense of meaning, connection to something larger, values, culture, purpose.
Finding meaning beyond just grades.
Exactly. It provides that intrinsic motivation, that resilience.
And the core idea linking them all is relationality. Everything is connected, nothing can be separated.
That's the heart of it. You can't fix academic struggles, cognitive, without considering the emotional state, the physical well-being, the sense of purpose. Trying to boost math scores without addressing a child's anxiety or hunger.
Yeah.
It's like painting over a water stain instead of fixing the leaky pipe.
It misses the root cause. It's so different from how schools often operate, siloing these things.
Completely different. And this isn't just theory. The source points to a practical example. The First Peoples Principles of Learning, or FPPL.
Developed by the First Nations Education Steering Committee in Canada.
That's right, back in 2015. It's presented as this compelling counter-narrative to the dominant Western model. It's rooted in indigenous ways of knowing, embodying that holistic worldview.
So how do these principles reshape learning?
Well, take one principle. Learning ultimately supports the well-being of the self, the family, the community, the land, the spirits, and the ancestors. Right away, that broadens the whole purpose of learning.
It's not just individual achievement.
No, it's about the thriving of this entire interconnected web, connecting the learner to place, community, history, future. Collective well-being is the goal.
What else?
Another key one. Learning is holistic, reflective, experiential, and relational. It emphasizes connectedness, doing, experiencing, reflecting, not just passively receiving information. It values reciprocal relationships and a sense of place.
That sounds much more active and engaged.
Definitely. And there are others, like learning involves recognizing the consequences of one's actions that fosters ethical responsibility.
And learning involves generational roles and responsibilities, acknowledging wisdom from elders, duties to the future. That's a big shift from individualism.
Huge. Plus, learning recognizes the role of indigenous knowledge, directly challenging the marginalization of non-Western knowledge.
Yeah.
And learning is embedded in memory, history, and story, valuing narratives as fundamental ways of knowing.
I like learning involves patience and time, a real counter to the rush we often see.
Isn't it? It encourages deep engagement, and learning requires exploration of one's identity, crucial for self-actualization.
Yeah.
And finally, recognizing that some knowledge is sacred, needing permission to share. That shows deep respect.
When you put all those FPPL principles together with holism, you see a totally different picture of success.
Totally. It's not about a test score. It's about becoming a complete, connected, responsible human, contributing to a thriving community, respecting that interconnectedness. Success is the flourishing of the whole.
So this all sounds powerful, but how do we actually do this? How do we reclaim knowledge, shift our epistemology? The source gives this incredible anecdote, reclaiming the village.
Ah, yes, that's a really moving story. The setting itself is incredibly significant. It takes place at a former residential boarding school in Duncan, British Columbia.
On Vancouver Island. These schools have such a painful history. Forced assimilation, cultural suppression, trauma.
Exactly. Sites of profound historical trauma. So gathering there carries immense symbolic weight.
The gathering itself is in a circle, right? Reinforcing that relational idea.
Yes. First Nations elders, non-Indigenous women, educational leaders,
Mm-hmm.
all there for deep listening leadership.
Yeah.
It's more than a meeting. It's described as a collective act of healing.
And then there's Tabilam's story, a guide who shares how just being in that building, a relic of the Sisters of St. Anne, makes his heart heavy.
He talks about how his traditional language, hulikuminum, and his music were robbed from him in those institutions. But then in that circle, he finds healing through those very things, language, song. It's incredibly powerful.
It really underscores the impact of those places and the resilience needed for reclamation, healing through what was stolen.
It speaks volumes about the power of indigenous culture.
Then Michelle, another participant, shares this insight about hierarchy.
Right. She observes how the hierarchical system, symbolic of Western society, breeds competition and lateral violence. People transfer their experience of oppression onto those below them.
Instead of challenging the system itself, we see that play out in schools sometimes, right? Power dynamics causing strife.
Absolutely. Then the gathering shifts into these amazing communal activities, weaving cedar baskets, preparing and sharing traditional foods like smoked salmon, singing traditional songs.
A real enactment of that relational worldview.
And in that process, the old ladies, the elders, become the revered center of village life, not marginalized, but central. It's about sharing culture, wisdom, healing. It completely flips the usual hierarchy.
But even in that setting, when they ask questions like, how does it feel to be in this community, the responses were really raw.
Yeah, people said things like, shut out, isolated, invisible. Like I have to clamor to get up front. I can only see the backs of people's heads.
Even in a circle. It shows how deeply ingrained those individualistic hierarchical mindsets are, the pain of exclusion.
Right. Changing the physical setup isn't enough. You need that deeper cultural shift.
And this whole anecdote illustrates the village philosophy the source promotes. Shifting from hierarchy to a circle where emotion is valid knowledge, connecting over shared histories.
And where the core belief is, every child has a distinct gift, a total counter to the deficit achievement gap thinking.
And children are paired with mentors to learn those gifts. Real intergenerational learning, not just standardized curriculum.
Exactly.
This story really brings us to that fundamental question the source keeps asking, epistemology. How do we know what we know? What counts as knowledge? Where does that hierarchy of knowledge come from?
It's a deep dive into truth itself. The source critiques Western epistemology, arguing it often equates understanding with measuring. Knowledge gets valued when it's validated by quantity.
Like a test score is valid data.
But a teacher's deep intuition about a child or an elder's traditional wisdom, that gets dismissed as anecdotal, unmeasurable. That's the hierarchy it challenges. What gets counted often counts more, even if it's less valuable.
It also mentions scientific colonialism, the idea that our own ingrained ways of thinking, usually Western, can trap us.
Right. Conceptually incarcerated is the term used. It limits our ability to even see or value other forms of knowledge. A researcher might design something based purely on Western metrics, unintentionally ignoring indigenous ways of learning because their framework doesn't recognize it as valid data.
It's like wearing blinders you don't even know you have.
The source also references Stuart Hall's components of Western knowledge, building classifying societies, creating images, representation systems, evaluation criteria. These shape how we understand, reinforcing power structures.
And there's a direct historical line from this, isn't there? How data became valid through measurement, often rooted in things like eugenics and early IQ testing.
A really problematic history. And that lineage, the source argues, leads straight to the achievement gap myth, the test and punish era, and even reinforcing pseudoscientific ideas about genetic differences in intelligence. It connects flawed epistemology to real harm in education.
So the real challenge isn't just test scores or curriculum guides.
No. The source says the deepest challenges lie in the cultural wealth and wisdom of our villages, both current and ancestral. It's about reevaluating what we value as knowledge, recognizing those overlooked sources, stories, traditions, lived experiences that traditional data misses, shifting from deficit to assets.
Okay, so after critiquing the old ways and introducing holism, the source offers a path forward, the street data framework. It's presented as a practical roadmap for your journey.
And it's grounded in 3 core beliefs about what data can be, which is a really different way of thinking about data.
What are they?
First, data can be humanizing, shifting focus from numbers back to people, their stories, their full humanity. Second, data can be liberatory. It can actually help free us from oppressive systems and narratives, using info to dismantle inequity, not reinforce it.
And third,
data can be healing. It can address past harms, acknowledge trauma, promote well-being, moving data from a tool of compliance to one of empathy, justice, restoration.
that's a radical reimagining. The framework itself has 4 parts.
Yeah, 4 parts, each with guiding principles and core stances. Part 1 is, Why street data? Why now? It basically recaps what we've discussed, the need to reimagine knowing and learning, grounded in holism.
Yeah.
Sets the stage.
Got it. Then part two.
Part 2, choose the margins. This is about changing how we see and collect data. Guiding principle 2 is see the barriers, imagine what is possible. The stance is awareness, seeing those invisible structural barriers and daring to envision something truly equitable.
Asking what's really stopping the student
Right.
beyond the scores.
Exactly. Then guiding principle 3, center voices from the margins. The stance is anti-racism, intentionally shifting perspective, prioritizing the experiences of those historically marginalized students of color, indigenous students, etc., listening to the silenced voices.
And principle 4.
Seek root causes over quick fixes. The stance is deep listening, moving beyond symptoms like low scores to understand the underlying systemic issues, resisting easy answers, committing to empathetic inquiry, understanding the deep why.
So how do you do that in part 2? What are the actions?
2 key actions. First, flip the dashboard. Invert the traditional top-down data model. Data should flow up from lived experiences of students, families, educators, not dictated from the district office down.
So student surveys on belonging might become more important than district spreadsheets.
Potentially, yes. And second, pound the pavement. Literally go into communities, engage directly, collect that robust array of street data.
Through conversations, listening to stories, observations.
Yes. Understanding lived realities. Qualitative insights like narratives, hopes, fears, experiences of racism or support. Maybe some quantitative data too, but collected in culturally responsive ways, meaningful to the community, moving way beyond standard metrics.
Okay, that leads to part 3. Deepen the learning. This is about using those insights to transform teaching and learning itself.
Right. Guiding principle 5. Equity work is first and foremost pedagogical. The stance is agency. Equity isn't just policy, it's how teaching happens, empowering learners, students, and educators to own their growth.
Building capacity?
Exactly. Guiding principle 6. Less is more, focus is everything. Stance. Coherence. Countering the overwhelming fragmented curriculum, prioritizing deep understanding over superficial breadth, focusing on what truly matters.
Like exploring a few key concepts deeply, making connections.
Yes. And principle 7. Mobilize a pedagogy of voice for educators. Stance. Symmetry. Empowering educators as learners, too, creating a reciprocal environment where students and teachers both have agency. Learning flows both ways. Shared ownership.
And the practical actions for part 3.
First, redefine success. Move beyond just scores to a holistic view, emotional intelligence, civic engagement, cultural identity, problem solving, alongside academics.
Then build coherence. Foster deep understanding by focusing on essentials, making connections cross subjects into life, creating a narrative, not just disconnected facts.
And finally, make learning public. Using things like performance-based assessment, culturally responsive projects, letting students show understanding authentically, reflecting their identities and communities, not just on standardized tests.
Projects, presentations, community work.
Exactly. Ways that are meaningful to the student.
Which brings us to the final part, part 4. Transform the culture. This sounds like where it all comes together.
It really is. Embedding equity into the daily fabric of the school. Guiding principle 8. Break the cycle of shame. Stance. Vulnerability. Creating environments where mistakes are learning opportunities, not failures to hide. Where people feel safe to be open, authentic, vulnerable about challenges and biases.
Moving away from shaming towards understanding.
Yes. And principle 9. Every moment is an equity moment. Stance. Warm demander. Recognizing constant opportunities to advance equity, big and small, being supportive and empathetic, warm, while holding high expectations for addressing inequities.
Holding space for discomfort while pushing for change.
Precisely. The actions here are embrace vulnerability, leadership being open about growth, creating psychological safety for tough conversations,
And related to that.
call folks in and up to equity through those warm demander conversations, combining empathy with clear expectations for growth. Not shaming, but saying, I value you, let's work on this together to align with our equity goals. Fostering collective responsibility.
So this whole integrated framework, reimagining data, choosing margins, deepening learning, transforming culture, it acts as a leverage balm.
That's the phrase the source uses. A leverage balm at every level of the school system. Not isolated changes, but deep systemic transformation. Building momentum for equity by addressing roots, not just symptoms, in a coherent human way.
It's a complete vision for rethinking how we know, learn, and lead in schools.
A profound shift, really. Asking us to look past the easily counted to what's truly valuable.
Well, that was definitely a deep dive into reimagining education through street data and holism. We've covered the limits of traditional data, the power of holism and indigenous knowledge, and how this street data framework offers a path, a humanizing, liberatory, healing path.
It really boils down to shifting what we value, what we measure, and crucially, who we listen to.
And this isn't just relevant for educators.
Not at all. This lens is powerful for anyone in any field where information shapes decisions about people, communities, policies. It really encourages you, the listener, to question your own assumptions about knowledge, about what matters.
To see beyond the numbers to the human experience underneath.
Exactly.
So as you go about your day, we want to leave you with one final challenging thought, a quote directly from the source material for you to mull over.
For all our talk of being student-centered, we have bought into a success paradigm that robs many children of their voices, marginalizes their gifts, and prioritizes measurement and incremental improvement over learning and transformation.
Wow. What are your reactions to that? Does it resonate? Does it challenge you? Do you agree, disagree? Maybe somewhere in between.
Think about how a more holistic approach, rooted in listening, empathy, humanizing data, what might that look like in your own world, your work, your community?
Lots to think about. Until next time, keep diving deep.